see each other. And thank you very much for joining us again this afternoon. And the welcome to the panel and an interesting topic that no. An interesting topic that we have very much is to say, what are the changes in consumers' behaviour? What are customers actually doing? And what will their behaviours do to change the landscape very much of what our industry is about, what the investments are about, and actually what kind of changes will be affected? What do you see in the marketplaces in which you're involved that really are driving this consumer behaviour, this change? And really not just about sustainability, but just what people like to do with their various habits, with their travel habits, and what you see coming up and what the future will be in terms of, is it a better ROI? Is it a more challenging ROI? And really looking at it from the point of view as well is that we do understand that as investors, if you're not getting a return on investment, if you're not making your profit, then we actually don't have a business, we don't have an industry long term. Pretty obvious, but at the same time, I think some people sometimes forget, not in your side, but that we actually have to make good profit and good return on investment from our activities within the industry. So if we can start with you, Hamza, and I'll ask each of you to take your time and tell us about your organizations, about your business, and about your main activities.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gerald, and thank you for having me on the panel. From South Africa, private equity fund, which has been in very diverse spaces for the last 10 years, but in the peak of COVID, made a very conscious decision to reallocate the portfolio and drive into hospitality and tourism. And that sounds like a very odd thing to do when you have an international operator which is handing you the key back to the building. You have a building in the heart of Cape Town, and you've always been a owner where this fits into part of many things. And that's really when we made a very conscious choice as a group that we're going to get into and build a significant scalable tourism hospitality portfolio in South Africa. But we're going to do it very differently. We're going to do it in a way where we're a very thoughtful owner. We engage the brands in a very meaningful manner, and we try and unlock and create disruption, not by coming up with crazy ideas, but by going back and doing some of the basics right. So currently in South Africa, we have 4 hotels. All 4 are managed by Hyatt. But again, when we say they're managed by Hyatt, we are very active owners. We push the envelope significantly with the brand. We try and understand and help some of these big brands localize efficiently, because these are things which they haven't done. But also, coming back to what today's topic is, you are going to fetch rate ROI by doing all of those things, by making the guest the most important thing. And those are the kind of things we are doing as an organization. We are pushing the brands, and the brand that we work with, we're pushing them to do it. Because look, these are big brands, they've grown, they get it, but they talk about stats, numbers, but very few talk about the guest at heart. And if you get that right, and you get that right in a patient, in a meaningful manner, rate ROI follow. But it takes time, it takes some patience, and it takes some understanding. And very few owners historically have gotten into that. So we're hoping to be different. We're making those steps in South Africa, and we're hoping to share some of those findings with our colleagues and the panelists today.
Thank you very much. I find it very interesting being a hotelier at heart, and having been involved, first of all, working with a big brand for my first 23 years, i.e. Forte Hotels in different parts of the world, including South Africa, by the way. And also then being involved in the setting up of Jumeirah as a brand in itself within the United Arab Emirates, within Dubai. And we have this forever debate, and I think it's becoming much more of a prevalent debate now about the role of operators. Earlier it was interesting to hear Emma saying that, how do we know that the money is staying in the country when these big companies have the hotels? Because the impression is that the hotels are owned by these big companies, but we know that they all follow a very asset-light management model, which is fine, and it is You know, is there a trend? And I know it's a bit of a sort of a provocative question in that I think I know the answer and I'm probably wrong. But is there a trend, not with investors, but with customers, to say, you know, if I go to Cape Town, I prefer to stay with the South African brand, but I need to know that it has the consistency and the quality of, for example, your brand under a great company called Hyatt, who run the hotel. How do you see that balancing, and how do you see that evolving in the future?
You know, I think customers are going to still feel comfortable going to the global brands, but that's going to be short-lived if these global brands don't innovate and don't come out of the box, out of the molds. Brands have to stop just shoving down brand standards and saying that's brand standard and that works.
Yes.
They have to start focusing on the experiential parts. Guests today going into a city like Cape Town will want to stay because they like the safety, the standard, they like the loyalty component, they like the touch points, but they want a brand which is going to offer them the experiential parts, which is going to go out and say, listen, you're not going to get a cookie cutter gym with the same equipment you get everywhere, but if you want to do yoga, Pilates on the pool, a nicely localized piece, guests are going to want that, and that's what's going to drive rate premium.
Right.
But brands need to understand that. Brands are so obsessed with just driving down brand standards, set of local pieces, and then having one obscure GM who's been with them for 20 years, and he just takes the same brand part. All of those things are going to have to change. I think the brands are capable of doing it, but if they get on the boat and they make the changes and put the customer at heart, then I think we're in for a very significant ride and change, all which will drive ROI and rate. But again, the brands need to come on board.
Well, I would love to come back to that later in the discussion. I think all three of you will have very strong opinions on this. And let's talk a bit later about the franchise versus HMA, as a hotel management agreements, which I think that will be relevant as well, because it is reflecting the trends with customers and how they see the products going forward. So, Michael, I thought I was so jealous when I heard that you're working in Rio de Janeiro. You know, what a fantastic location to be actually based. And you explained your family is Brazilian and how you've been there. So we'd love to hear from you about all about what you're doing and what Fairmont in Rio.
Well, first I have to congratulate an owner that understands operations. So that's already a big asset into anything. I think the pandemic made us all look outside the box. I like to say that during the pandemic, we were saying a pregnant woman was a group, and if she brought her husband, it would be a convention, because we didn't know where the business was coming from. And in reality, what it helped us look at, and I'm talking from the operator side, who works with the asset directly, once the asset understands, and I think he said a lot, he could have spoken for me, but the fact that the asset understands that CapEx and OpEx are part of the business to make it generate, and the brand gets it, then it makes it easy. In our case, it became that all of a sudden from, let's be honest, every five-star brand, hotel, doesn't matter. I'm a card. We have 54 brands, and we're in Rio de Janeiro. We opened the first Fairmont just before the pandemic. We opened the 5th of August 2019, and then we closed on the 25th of after 360 million investment. We closed in March and then had to reopen in September. What we didn't do is we didn't stop talking to the market during the shutdown. We were literally talking to clients and asking them first, how are you, where are you going? And we were trying to figure out, and all of a sudden, we were talking to we had 78% occupancy internationally. And we didn't talk to the Brazilian market. We didn't require it. And all of a sudden, we had to go local. And when we opened at 98% with the Brazilians. And all of a sudden today, a year and a half later, we are 56% international and 44% local, which means it's come to stay. I believe that's a consistency globally.
And would you say that's a healthy balance that you have?
I think it's a safer balance for the investor and for the brand, which makes, as he said very correctly, brands have to get local.
Yeah.
It's not, the standards are there, that's why an investor will choose a brand A, B, or C, because at the end of the day, the asset needs to guarantee that his investment is going to be taken care of by somebody. But the fact that an asset can actually get into the operations, understand that it is a local issue. What happens in, I love to have the conversations with the assets when we're discussing what's happening in Cartagena and Rio. You can't do the same. It's two totally different destinations, to different publics. And today it is experiential. Today I can tell you that 100% of every square meter in our hotel, we will create an experience with. If you can pay, we can play. And it is about the brand understanding and the operation, understand what the market wants. And people today, they want to do something different. From doing a private breakfast, we as a hotel, we actually do a private breakfast on the Chrysler Redeemer before it opens to the general public. So we went and created, let's say, DMC operations to help the market back. And that's an Accord vision as well.
How do you get the breakfast up there?
Well, you go by car. It's very simple. There's 4 wheels and a driver, and you get there at 1 o'clock in the morning. All right. And you set yourself up, and the team's freezing, and then the sun comes up, and Christ goes, thank you for coming.
What an experience.
And then you take an aquarium, and you do a dinner in an aquarium. And it is about experiences. Today, the traveler knows what he wants. He knows how much he wants to spend. And Brazil, we have very creative people in Brazil. Brazil, everybody likes to say, we're back. We're not back. We're in a different world, talking about a different thing, and clients are being different. Online travel agencies are changing. Virtuosos, the signatures, the luxury market is back. The amount of growth in private agencies came back into the world. So it's cyclical. You know, what we have at the moment is an issue with the airlines. It's about the cost of flying has become very expensive. Yes. And the reduction which will affect. So the local market is suppressing a lot of what you lost on an international scale. But it is, as the asset says, and it's a joint venture. When the brand gets it and he thinks local, it will make a big difference. We ourselves, we have over 365 hotels in Brazil. And we have 7...
This is Accor.
It's Accor Group, and we opened the first Fairmont, and we've got...
sorry, Michael, who owns the actual property?
Accor Invest. So Accor in 2015 took all its assets and put it into a financial fund.
I see.
And that is separate to operations. They are now 2 different companies. We own, I think, about 30% of Accor Invest. It is totally, we have an asset manager who knows us even better as an operator.
But it's unusual, isn't it, to have that kind of investment from the operator in the actual...
Well, I think it could have been him, it could have been any financial fund who understood that this brand actually has what it takes to make something happen there. So it's growth, and it's about ADRs and ROIs. It's not, you cannot operate anymore as you say, it cannot just be based on cost factor anymore. And I think the brands globally, and Accor gets it in a sense, it's about top line. It's how you generate the sales. And then business intelligence has become the big thing. How do you recognize your client? It's very simple. A couple walk into your hotel. One's got a book and the other one's got a Kindle. If they're paying £1,000 or whatever it is a night, how do you make that experience luxury? It's amazing how when you can find out that the person wakes up and there's a book reader marking her book, somebody put it in place, or you walk in the room and there's extra plugs because you're carrying a Kindle. That's where luxury has gone. And then it comes to the point where the client wants to do something different and he has a family, and you take him into your kitchen and you deck them out in chef's clothes and you allow them to cook. People know what they want. And they are asking for it. And it's our job as investors and as operators to always be ahead of the game. And as I was talking about the Chrysler Redeemer, the breakfast, we've gone into so many different ways. There is not 1 square meter in the hotel today that we do not sell. And before we wouldn't, we are this, we don't touch it. The investor would say, no, we don't want to put the money in. Today the relationships become more consolidated.
I think what you're saying really is you're reflecting customer demand, but the customer is far more informed than ever before.
He pays the bill.
In terms of all the different ways to know what you are about before you know what you're about yourself. So
and the brand is the guarantee for the client. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's also what we do internally is best practices, how you exemplify. What happened in San Francisco, I can replicate in Rio. What happened in New York, or in London, or whatever. I was with the team from the Savoy today, Sam and Claudia, and they're doing things we hadn't thought about. So I've already sent it to the team back home, and it's connecting. So it is about the customer. And we're going back to old school, customer is king. He pays the bill. And I think this post-pandemic, or this new reality we live in, the customer has become a priority. And again, it is about experience. If you cannot outthink the competition, knowing what you want to do and look at your destination, again, what I do in Rio, maybe you can't do in Cape Town or you can't do in Joburg. Ik praat Afrikaans, I was born there. So, and then what I do in Rio, you can't maybe do at the Savoy. I mean, can you close the Eiffel Tower down like we do for breakfast at Chrysler Redeemer? Maybe not.
Unlikely.
So that, I think it's really experience and the relationship between the asset and the operator. And he said something very interesting, your question actually. Is it the local operator better than the global operator? I disagree. I think the global operators have become local. Unfortunately, we don't have any more Geralds with all this experience in the GM roles. And you remember your time, you spoke to owners. Today you speak to pension funds.
Yes.
And there isn't an owner. There's not the man.
And there's asset management.
It's a group of people that are making decisions who also have their assets invested somewhere else, and they need that the return on that property. Is it a trophy asset? Is it something important that they've given as a guarantee to a bank? There's a lot of things going on there, but at the end of the day, it's about why choose our hotel brand, because we can actually make it work.
We'll circle back. We'll see. So, Mohammed, this is a great panel actually. We're going from Rio to South Africa and now to, and I'm not being patronizing when I say it, a really fabulous country and an amazing experience for any visitor who's ever gone to the Sultanate of Oman. It's just what they offer, what they give in terms of your coastal beauty, but also the mountains and such a variety. And talking about it also, and I'm sure it's the same for every country, but the people. And I think that's what our customers also want to understand and want to know is, you know, can I meet the local people? Can I talk to them? But we'd love to hear from you, Mohammed, about what the company does, what your main specifications are and what your objectives are in relation to the evolution of travel and tourism in the Sultanate.
Sure. Well, thank you, Gerald. Delighted to be part of this team's panel.
Thank you.
I want to start by just reflecting back on the point. As a developer, we tend to work greatly with partners, with investors. Question today is, why tourism? And if we look at the economic impact, tourism has been one of the main sectors that have been hit. But the discussion that we keep having with investors is, while we understand that tourism as a sector has the lowest immunity, it is also one of the sectors that has the fastest recovering trends, simply because of one particular reason. People will always want to travel. People will always want to go around the world. People will always want to create new memories and create new experiences. But in the midst of that experience, it's not just about the luxury of goods and the luxury of the materials. People have started to appreciate a whole different level of luxury, the luxury of mindfulness, the luxury of self-connect, the luxury of connecting with the nature, connecting with the people, connecting with the community.
Indeed.
I think a lot of the things that we had, as Imran, as a developer, as a master developer for the government of Sultanate of Oman, have fortunately been experimenting not post-COVID but pre-COVID. And some of these programs have seen light and have shown immense resilience. You spoke about the community engagement, Gerald. One of the community programs that we've been dealing with is in the northern part of the Sultanate, which is a beautiful area called Musandam. And we know that a lot of cruise liners keep going there for an experience, but you know, the reality of cruise liner audiences are they don't spend much money. You know, they might travel around, everything's being pilled, but they just want to be looking at something different. And so we established a new program called a Zeri program, which is having local women develop local handicraft and learning languages like Italian and French to be able to communicate. And if I recall very well, one of the Italian tourists said, I've never actually spoken to an Arab woman, let alone do business with her in my short term. And that just kind of breaks all types of stereotypes, and that just adds a whole different experience to that. And going back to Hamza's point, that signature experience is something that we've all been looking at.
And the uniqueness.
And the uniqueness, because one of the main trends that have changed, there was a recent study that I read about and from Costa Rica, that not only is the number of people willing to go to more environmentally conscious countries have increased, the amount of money that people are willing to pay more knowing that they're going to be paying in a resort that is more environmentally and socially conscious is increasing as well. And so I don't think the discussion today is just about the ROI. I think the discussion is also about the SROI. What is the social return on investment? How much of that money that coming into the country gets revolves within the communities? And for the investors who are looking just for the profitability, they are now starting to understand that customers are actually willing to make that local experience, to meet that villager, to meet that local family, to make sure that their breakfast or their lunch or their dinner is coming from the backward neighborhood. That experience matters. That experience becomes more purposeful. That cash that I pay, I'm putting it into a face. That ultimately what makes people get a better sense of the luxurious experience that we're talking about. And I think these are the trends that we have noticed, which resonate extremely well, because if there's anything about connecting to the nature and connecting and meditating and detoxicating, I think Oman falls perfectly well with these post-COVID trends, because it's all about not making sure that we're filling our hotels with guests, but also making sure they do connect themselves with a larger experience and a more purposeful experience.
No, it's amazing. I will indulge you a little bit and say about 10 years ago, I took my family, it's not far from Dubai anyway, to go to the Musson Dam in the northern part of the Sultanate. And we went out on a dhow, which is the old Arabic boat, sitting on carpets on the deck with a lot of other people as well. And after about 10 minutes, and they know what's going to happen, the dolphins start chasing the dhow along the coastline. And we came to an island called Telegraph Island, which was the original telegraph cabling that was done by the British. And at that, they then pass out snorkeling masks and the snorkel to each of the passengers who want them. And we jump overboard. And they guide us to snorkel around the little island and then back on the boat again. And you can think of these experiences, as you say, where you are really getting totally immersed in what's happening with the local culture. But one area that I'd like to explore a little bit, and I think it still comes back, and I like your SROI, which is very important, or even CROI, which is credible return on investment, is, what do we do when we talk about, first of all, we talk a lot more of domestic tourism. So, okay, if I'm in the aviation industry, well, I'm not so happy about that, because it means that I'm not encouraging travellers on my aircraft. And it's a little bit of a worry also. What happens to the factory workers? They deserve a holiday. But now we're saying, no volume tourism. We must only have, very individualistic, luxury, high-end tourism that is beyond the affordability of a lot of people. And yet, if you look at organizations like Ryanair, what will they do if everybody goes down? What will they do in the Mediterranean countries? How do we do that? Would anybody like to take that up? Anybody?
Well, I think there's a question where the lower classes, let's say, with the mileage programs that exist in brands, have become a new source of revenue. If you take us and other brands, we interact with so many different mileage programs, be it the Veil or Smiles, British Airways, whatever. And people are actually, post-pandemic, we actually had a great success where we were actually promoting packages with these mileage programs, because we have all, which is all Live Limitless from a card, which connects. And the intelligence behind that is that it's a new piece of money. The amount of mileage that was accumulated during the pandemic, where people, the mileage programs to not lose people were giving out mileage and what have you, that became money. That is money. So we actually have clients who you can see they are not the right client for that luxury property, but he's fulfilling a dream. He could go to a luxury property because of the mileage product. At the same time, he can use a lower class property with it. And that's a new source of income that many people haven't woken up to yet. And the minister said it there. It's all about whatever we do as an investor or as a destination or as an operator, we are impacting locally. The money's not going anywhere else except locally. What we do is, and hotels should be looking at themselves as destinations. They should be taking on their whole area around themselves, because when we put in a property, we actually get new restaurants opening around. We've actually seen things with the Fairmont in Rio. We've helped make the neighborhood better. And that's something the Brazilian government is very invested in making Brazil grow. I mean, you look at Brazil, if you take away Alaska, we're bigger than continental USA. We have a saying in Brazil that talking about local experiences. We have something called a feijoada in Brazil, which is black beans and rice. It's the most common food we have. But you could eat it every day in a different city and you'll never eat the same dish twice because they do it differently. Like I'm sure it happens back home in South Africa and with yourselves in Oman.
So what's the population of Brazil?
Brazil, 220 million.
Wow. That's almost the same as the US.
No, they're about 100 and something million bigger. We've got to catch up. And they have a nice exchange rate.
Russia.
We love their money. We love their money. And I think a lot of the countries that are here, the exchange rate is another big incentive player to use on this way. But there are so many new ways that hotels like ourselves are finding to generate revenues to the investor and to the ROI, let's say. And it is also, for instance, a package that you can do a local experience, a cocktail lesson, sleep in a room and have a spa, and you pay with mileage. So brands have to be creative, and we all became creative during the pandemic.
Well, would you say then it's also very important that brands have the multiplicity of the different levels from 2-star to 5-star to luxury in what they're doing?
To sustainability long term, I believe it's going to be a trend over time.
And Hamza, shall we go back a little bit to how you would work this between franchising, between hotel management agreements? Because I think it is a very important part in establishing and determining what kind of return on investment, what kind of profitability that you do have, and then do you just end up not having a hotel operator, but you have an asset manager instead, and you're also paying the asset manager a percentage of the revenue? I'd like to hear your opinion on how the whole thing, and just also if you wouldn't mind folding into that, how all the big companies, like say take a Marriott, can have now something like 32 different brands, which we in the business would say, well, that's just to get around your territorial restrictions so that you can't have another Marriott within 5 kilometers or whatever. So they come up with a new brand. Well, what's your take on how all of this is evolving?
So I have a very strange view on franchise management. My view is a very simple one. What works in North America necessarily is not going to work for markets like Africa and Middle East. So that's my first point. I also have a very simple and a very succinct view. If the brands can't manage their own brand and implement, to expect a white label third party to get it right, you're already adding a layer of complexity in an already complex relationship between owner operator. So I'm of the view that owners they have two choices. Either they're going to start understanding this business. The days of the trophy owner is gone. The day that I'm the mighty, mighty owner and I'm the guy who writes a check and I look at the NOI is gone. So either owners are going to start understanding that they need to, and whether they do it with the help of an asset manager, whether they help, but I think my view for the region where I am in sort of Africa, Middle East, brands are going to have to realize they're going to have to up their game very quickly. Brands have also had a big challenge in COVID where they've basically fired half of the middle management. So basically you've got the upper echelon and you've got basically nobody else in the middle. And brands are very, prone to, if there's a problem, they call the GM and say, you're our guy, you fix it. That culture has to change. That culture of the brands having to start resourcing people who are owner-centric is going to have to come into place. Brands are going to have to understanding that they can't just sit and expect the commercial engine to work and it's going to happen. And if brands are going to have that proliferation and that sustainability and that market share, they're going to have to make those changes. Otherwise, they're going to lose their lunch to local brands. They're going to lose their lunch to other distribution channels. And that adoption, I think, is going to have to happen. So my personal views, I'm still firmly of the view, the best people to manage and execute the brands are the brands themselves, but they need to skill themselves.
But do you not see it also developing very clearly that exactly for the reasons you're saying, the brands then will turn around and the owners will turn around and say, look, we've got the expertise already within our asset management, within our, because like if you have 5 or 6 Hyatts or you're running a number of hotels already, you know that you're probably more effective or as effective as an international brand. So you will say to that brand, right, we will pay you a percentage of the revenue, we'll just make a franchise, but we will actually run the hotels ourselves. We will go into your loyalty program, you go into your reservation system, we'll pay you for that. but we don't expect you to actually run our hotels. We do it on a franchise basis.
So the asset manager, in my mind, is a very good armchair critic. He's a very good armchair critic who then allows execution to take place with a very strong management team, which is under the control of the brand, and the brand has provided that management team with a library. That management team can, tap in. Do I need the best expertise in food and beverage? And I want to take a minute to talk about food and beverage, because that's one area in our business which has been a grudge.
Fantastic.
Hoteliers don't like food and beverage. We believe we sell the room great, make great, margins on room, and we hate food and beverage. We've never really taken the ability to understand that if we, these are our captive customers. If we don't render to them real, authentic experiences in our hotels, finding expensive brands, franchises, putting them in on the F&B isn't the solution.
I have to interrupt you. I would challenge you to say hoteliers love food and beverage, but owners and asset managers think hoteliers don't know anything about food.
But that's the problem. And I think for us, we've made that shift. The ability to very quickly evolve from a concepting culinary execution in hotels quickly. We've done that in our hotels in South Africa. We've got 2 Hyatt houses. Hyatt typically does not have a food and beverage outlet in a select service. We have a food and beverage outlet which works, which performs. Better yet, in the off periods during the day, we plug that hotel restaurant outlet into a dark kitchen, into Uber Eats, and use that for delivery. And it's working. But now getting a brand across to understand that wasn't easy, because they've never done that. But these are the kind of things where you also need to drive customer experience and also look in the total revenue matrix.
And it's a win-win situation. We did it with the Al Nasim at Medina Jumeirah, where we took 6 areas in the design phase, and we said these 6 areas will be shell and core only, and we lease them out to F&B operations, but we will not run them ourselves. And they've been a huge success and much better return for the ownership then as well, in terms of and for the customer experience.
Because you give them choice, you're giving them variety. Yeah. But I think the key thing again is brands are either going to have to innovate, or they're going to, I think, go through major evolution. And I think so. And I think the business model of a couple of area presidents going and shaking an owner's hand once a year, seeing them, making them happy, is gone. Those days are long over.
That's for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hamza. Mohammed, we want to hear a bit more about what your major objectives are, what you're really getting into. And I know we're going to hear separately from you as well, but it would be interesting relative to what we're talking about. And if any of you have the bandwidth as well, I think it's worthwhile understanding how are the bookings being made? What's the customer behavior in terms of booking.com, OTAs, the whole sphere of that, what is evolving and developing, just something to put in your head while also we're asking.
Well, allow me to touch base on the domestic tourism point that you mentioned.
Oh, yes.
And, Michael mentioned a very important point. There is no such thing as an international brand if you don't localize yourself around it. And this is extremely important.
Yes.
One of the main victims of COVID were the small businesses. But also, I think, for survival's sake, some of the most innovative ideas that we've seen came from some of these small and medium enterprises. While our hotels were struggling with occupancy, I remember meeting 2 fresh graduates that started up a company in the middle of COVID called TP, whereby people were not talking about 3, 4, or 5-star hotel. They were talking about a 1 billion-star hotel, because they started setting up tents on top of the mountains and camping. And that's how they sloganed themselves, right? Forget the 5-star experience, let's talk to you about the 1 million-star experience. And they were fully booked.
Wow.
And the hotels were struggling. And so in order for innovating themselves, looking at international benchmarks, they started looking at what internally the local companies are doing. And these are 2, mind me, fresh graduates, right, to come up with this idea. That idea started progressing. And then the discussion went on, you don't have to actually compete with the local companies. In the midst of adding local value and adding local capacity and local content, how can we complement each other? So a lot of the hotels that Imran actually develops and operates right now, we as a developer work very closely to connecting these experiences. So one of the natural destinations that we have beside one of the hotels that include any caves or mountain climbing or hiking or kayaking, we actually make sure that we ensure that we've got the right small businesses that run this in a very creative manner, and we connect them to the hotel.
Yes.
So rather than having an international brand running them, we actually get them to work with the local companies, and that's how they innovate, and that's how they work. And consumers are changing the trends not just from an international local point of view, but mind me, even male and female. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day. She's a single mom with young kids, and she kept saying that you guys don't promote particularly for single moms. I thought, yeah, I never really thought of that as a marketing campaign. And the realization that I had, she said, men tend to make money to save, women make money to spend. And I'm not saying that I'm generalizing, but that was her words in particular.
I see. If
And what she said is, I want to make money so I can know when is the next weekend I can take my kids and have a lovely experience on top of a mountain in Oman. And see, I never really noticed that. And in the midst of COVID, in the midst of domestic tourism, it's not just about looking at domestically, because hotels did struggle. I'll tell you the truth. Even within Oman, a lot of the hotels were focused on inbound tourists. And they somehow got stuck with domestic tourism because they're not all ready. Because they do look into trying to avoid the affordable experiences and the negotiations with the local, but then they realize actually there's no way out of it, because whatever you cater for domestic tourism, you're ultimately preparing yourself for a better localized experience for the international market.
Yes.
And that's just my take on how we're basically embedding these experiences to make sure that we have a more resilient sector.
So what are we going to do to help the airlines, to help the aviation industry, to ensure that we're not just about domestic tourism, and that we are actually as well ensuring that both the volume carriers and the luxury carriers like Oman Air, Emirates Air, that they can also have a future, and not just in a hub. But
oh, absolutely. When I talk about domestic tourism, I don't want to be misunderstood that it is the way out of it. Aviation did get affected big time, and domestic tourism would surely not help them as much as it could somehow be a cushion for the hospitality. But we need to notice that it's all about striking the right balance. It's all about making sure that you always have the right infrastructure for both domestic and inbound tourism. And one of the main things that I was looking at also from an aviation point of view is that we often make the mistake of thinking of domestic just within the boundaries of our own country. You see, Oman is part of the GCC country. And we've been always looking at domestic as Oman, but actually, if I look at the entire GCC as a domestic nation, the policies that we can make to make sure that we open up, not necessarily you have to lock down your boundaries of your country, but you don't necessarily mean you either open up for everyone or you lock down within your boundaries. You can open up regionally, have those connections, have those dialogues with your neighboring countries, decisable, to be able to see that there's some breadth, that if the next COVID, God forbid, happens, you don't have to scale it down to only the boundaries.
And you have two sections in your country of the Musandam, which is separated completely from the main part of Oman. So why not work very closely with the United Arab Emirates?
Exactly. So the domestic tourism, the domestic flights are not just within the remedies of the country, but the remedies of the region as well. And I think these are dialogues that can happen more often to make sure that we test and we calculate, rather than go for either you open up completely or you close down.
Just as a general question, I was reading earlier about how different generations use different ways of now making reservations. Like they say, Gen X uses TikTok and somebody else uses Instagram. My generation probably still uses the fax machine, I don't know, but we'll see. So, but do you see this affecting not just the type of people who are coming to stay with you, but indeed how the whole reservations distribution system works within the industry? Anybody
Well,
like
for
that?
us, it's definitely, we have so many, now I get more WhatsApps than I do emails, and people are actually booking on WhatsApp. You have to have a AI system that captivates what the client wants and connects him. The client is demanding. It's changed, and the client still is doing the same. He will call a travel agent or see a promotion. He will call the travel agent. He'll go online to check that he has the same or better rate, and then he'll come direct to the hotel and book. Or he'll come through a system. OTAs are here to stay, and we've seen some appear and some disappear, but the base of them are there, and it's amazing how they will keep surviving. Then you've got now hotels. We every time we're looking to talk to the client direct. At the end of the day, the price is almost the same. It's not a different way. There will be new systems coming out. I think it's about how we promote today is different.
And the commissions you pay as well to some of
Well,
these
well, I
ones
think
today.
that changed. In Brazil, for instance, in Rio, at one stage, one OTA sort of decided to tell everybody what the rates were, and the hotels got together and said, no, that's not, you don't decide what your commission is, we decide, and they closed the gate. So a destination has the power to decide that more than they actually know. Sometimes they're more scared about it because of the lobby issues, etc. But Rio did it and they won the fight. The big thing is the clients, as we change in communication, I do believe, and he said it, Mohammed said it very perfectly, it's how we tell people about ourselves. Today it's Instagram. If you think our hotel, we today have over 132,000 people on Instagram talking to us daily.
Wow.
Now, that's the number of people I have following the hotel in a year and a half. Now, influencers are now the form of, today we actually have influencers that in order to come and work with Fairmont, in our case, they have to create their own package. It's not for free anymore. And they have to tell people about it. And we actually pay commission to some influencers who generate more room nights a month than a travel agent. So it's totally changed. And I think that's the intelligence behind chasing the ROI, let's call it that way, and the customer experience. Today, who here doesn't have an Instagram account? Please raise your hand. You don't have an Instagram. You're amazing. There's two of you. Okay, you're losing a lot. But anyway, but at the end of the day, but you notice how you have become the minority.
No, as soon Aradna was going out of the room now, and she's going to go on Instagram.
Okay, but at the end of the day, it has become a new form of generating money for the destination and for the investor.
But then exactly how they monetize it, how you monetize it, and how you make sure that you have some kind of control of understanding where your customer base is coming from. And
but that's
how
where the
you
business
continue to
intelligence is growing out of it.
Yeah.
It is about the brands today have to own the client, and the client belongs to the investor too. And destination is the same.
We're running low. We're running low on time. I do want to open it up to the floor as well. But Hamza, I think you want to say something.
No, I mean, I just think the commercial engine and and understanding that is crucial. My view is it's also commercial distribution today is strongly linked to where the revenue management function is. I think today the smart guys are placing the right product, right inventory, right place, but also making sure it's linked to that whole chain, customers' experience. And I think getting that right is really what's going to define the business in the coming years.
Thank you. Now, I would like to open it up to the floor. I'd love a few questions from anybody in the audience, or comments. It doesn't have to be a question. Just tell us who you are. Is that right, Aradna? And Nikki, you heard my question? So, anybody, any questions? Anybody like to make any comments on what's been discussed? Apart from the fact that we're all smelling the lunch, so it's quite nice coming through. No questions? So, thank you very much. So, what we would like to do is, first of all, thank the three panelists for being here and for giving us so many insights into what's happening within the business, what the trends are, how the developments are in relation to customer behaviour, and indeed to the big operators of the brand's behaviour as well, and in relation to the future. Also later this afternoon we have Mohammed slotted to give us a presentation about Oman. And what we thought we'd do, because we lost so much time in relation to the blockages on the highway this morning, if it's all right with everybody, we'll ask Mohammed now to give us his presentation in the interest.
Well, since we're all smelling lunch, I don't know how much people will be
No,
focused on
hold
it,
on.
so perhaps we can do it.
Sorry?
I'm told not.
We're not.
We have to move to Brazil.
Oh, okay, fine.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mohammed. Okay, we sorted out. We still get you in time beforehand.
We can do
My
it after lunch.
apologies for that. Yeah. Okay. So the next one now, I leave to the Master of Ceremonies to decide, and I would like to thank the panel for being.
Thank you very much.
That was good.
That's great, guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Congrats.